Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Retained Recruiter Show. My name is James.
And I'm Jo. Nice to see everybody here again this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Fantastic. And we've got a very special guest today. He's one of our big fans. We always see him every week in the comment box, so we thought we'd actually get him on. Today we're joined by Darren Ledger, who's the sales director of iIntro. And also, as many of us see, if you haven't already looked Darren up on LinkedIn, I think he's called the No Sugar Coated Recruiter. He's got a very forthright blog and views and opinions on the state of the recruitment industry. So Darren, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to see you both.
Yeah, well, you know what we look like. So yeah, what we're hoping for today is in a discussion. Joe will run through what the topics are in a moment. We're hoping to get some of Darren's views. I say they're not only forthright; they're actually based on over 30 years' experience in the industry. And Darren is a veteran of our business, and and I believe that most of the things he says, are very pertinent and relevant to the job. So you'll form your own opinion. So I hope you'll enjoy today's episode as we listen with us. Joe, what are we covering today?
So we're going to pick Darren's brains around two things, really. So firstly, the candidate side, so how to actually get commitment from candidates. I think this is a hot topic at the moment, particularly with the market the way that it is. And then the second thing that we want to talk about with you is how to actually win clients, so how to win clients and how to influence clients. And then thirdly, really just to talk about the impact of those two things and how they can actually impact your recruitment business going forward. So then we're going to get started with, should we let Darren introduce himself properly?
Yeah, Darren, give a better intro than the one I gave you. I mean, just give a potted summary of your career so people can understand where your views are coming from. They're not just somebody who's just jumped into the industry, like we know some people do, Darren, and decide they're going to sort of revolutionise it. So give us a background, give people some understanding of who you are and what you do.
Okay, I'm in my penultimate year to the 30th year in this industry. I started out in the really fast-paced industrial recruitment marketplace back in, I think, 1993 or something crazy like that. It actually seems much longer ago. Recruiting things like drivers, order pickers, that kind of stuff. Huge learning curve at the time. All about energy, about tenacity, about persistence, about problem solving. I moved from there into basically chartered accountancy and finance recruitment, from there into executive search. And then since then, I've done lots of things. I've owned my own businesses. I've done lots of in-house consultancy work, which I'll come back to in a moment. So I've worn lots of different hats. Just very quickly, to think it's pertinent, I first came across iIntro back in about 2012. I was looking for something really radical, some real differentiator as a recruitment solution for various reasons. I stumbled across iIntro, which is obviously what we're here to discuss today to a certain extent. And it just answered all of the questions and solved all the problems and challenges that I faced in the recruitment marketplace at that time.
Good. So let's jump in and look at the first topic that we want to cover, which is how to get commitment from candidates. And as Joe mentioned, it is a hot topic at the moment because everyone says it's a candidate market at the moment, which means that candidates have a great deal of choice about who they talk to, and perhaps more importantly, where they go to. So what are your views, Darren, on the market for candidates at the moment, and what are your views on what recruiters can do to sort of move people along nicely?
Okay, so first and foremost, I think it's a really complex marketplace at the moment, probably more so than ever. But, one of the things that I find quite challenging for everybody involved in the recruitment sphere, without just focusing on candidates first and foremost, is the whole industry is like a moving target at the present time. Lots of people want to do lots of really good things. We want to rationalize the whole recruitment process. We want to add efficiency and accuracy into this. But as we know from, I think, the REC research, recruiters are extremely transient and they move businesses really, really quickly. Decision makers in hiring companies are extremely transient and they're moving really, really quickly. And candidates are very transient. So, going back to the old days where, you maybe had half a dozen mainstream recruiters in a specific sector or space, and candidates actually had a loyalty to them because they'd grown through their careers with those recruiters, whether it be Hayes or Michael Page. Today, there is so much options for everybody. And I think relationships aren't established as strongly as they used to be going back to the 90s. And I'm not harking back and saying the good old days. I'm just saying that things have changed significantly. Yeah. So to come back to your original point here, candidates have so many options today. And, I mentioned on a podcast with Andrew McCaskill from, I think it's Career Jump, a couple of weeks back. I sometimes worry that candidates today are almost too fluid and agile in the marketplace. So when they decide that they want to look for a job, whether they're approached by a recruiter or they decide to go and look at job boards and things, their options are so vast that candidates tend to suddenly find themselves in a situation where they're working with 5 or 6 different recruiters, or maybe 8 or 9 or 10 different vacancies. And I think we sometimes overlook the fact that the candidate's time is just as important as everybody else's in the equation. And seriously, what candidate today working from home has time to do 10 telephone interviews or 10 Zoom interviews and go through maybe 10 different recruitment processes for 10 different vacancies? And I think that's a real worry at the moment. I think recruiters are experiencing that as well as the clients. So
the challenge, though, then is what can you do as a recruiter that's going to get the candidate on side with you? So what are the things that we can do to help the candidate think, okay, because we're all after that relationship. We all want to say, work with me. I've got a great vacancy for you. It's going to be a great career. What can we do to convince the candidate, assuming we can get through to them and get them on the phone? What can we do to convince them that they should, that we've got their best interests at heart?
This is a really complex thing, isn't it? Because let's be honest about this. We have to go back to basics here. We all know that one of the bugbears of our entire industry is that organizations issue the same vacancy simultaneously to multiple recruiters at the same time. And all those recruiters, I'm not being disparaging here, I understand the place that they work in and the challenges they face. They then all post exactly the same job on exactly the same job boards to attract the same resource pool from the same locations. Candidates very often don't even realize they're applying for the same job multiple times. So that's not great for candidates.
So I think sorry, Dan. I think that the nub of that then is, the convincer that you can actually sort of say to the candidate is when you approach them. And again, listen, let's be honest here. We're talking about, this is called the Retained Recruiter Show. When we're working on a retained assignment, I think it's one of those really important messages to get across to the candidate very early on. Don't really agree with this one. Is hello, Darren. My name's James. I'm calling for my intro. The reason I'm calling you is I've been retained by my client, ABC Limited, and I specifically want to speak to you today to move them over so that they know that they're not going to be handled by anybody else, and you can start to embark on that conversation. I think we need to take them on that journey.
Absolutely. And what we need to do, we need to be able to offer candidates far more insight to enable them to make far smarter decisions about which jobs or which vacancies they pursue or don't.
Yeah.
Because we often talk in the intro family, we talk about clients, meeting candidates that they've only seen a CV. They meet that candidate and they know intuitively within 10 minutes of that interview starting that they're never going to hire that candidate. Mm. What we very rarely talk about is the poor candidate that maybe rocks up at an office location. They struggle to find somewhere to park. They walk into an office premises and they know intuitively within 5 or 10 minutes, they're never going to work in this business or for that hiring manager. And I think we often overlook the candidate aspect of this. And I think as a recruiter, we need to be able to have conversations with the candidates that are far better informed, where we've tested, challenged, and done far more robust insight into the actual vacancy itself to truly understand what our client needs for somebody to be successful in this role. And we would then apply that to the candidate so we can give them a really robust insight into what the challenges and opportunities are going to be in this position, what will make somebody successful or not win this opportunity, and does the candidate really want to engage in this process? And that takes a really robust approach. And without leading away with and kind of stealing the dialogue, James and Joe, I'm sorry.
We're okay. We invited you. You're again.
Yeah, that's the point of you being here. Carry on.
I'm going to go back to about 2005 because I think it's really, really relevant. I got my first in-house talent acquisition job based in the Middle East. And I worked with a visionary HR director called Stephen Harrison Murfield. And at the time, we were recruiting technology implementation integrators across the whole of the Middle East. Time was really valuable. We were recruiting from all over the world wherever we could find that technological resource and experience. And we realized that our program directors, project directors, etc., were spending lots of time because we tried to arrange interviews in the candidate's time zone as opposed to our time zone. They were spending lots of time interviewing candidates and very quickly establishing, sometimes at 10 p.m. in the evening, 2 a.m. in the morning, that candidate wasn't right for the position. And Steve and I decided that's because we weren't being robust enough and weren't doing enough due diligence on what we really needed. And the penny dropped. We needed less candidates, less CVs, less candidates, less interviews. We needed to identify people and qualify people really rigorously for the candidates' benefit, but also for our internal clients' benefit, to make sure that they were doing less interviews and getting to offer quicker. And that reflects directly back to where we started this first topic about the candidate aspects of this. Candidates want to be applying for less jobs, doing less interviews, and getting to offers far more quickly for jobs that they know they can do before they even interview. And that, I think, is really important. I think that's how you engage a candidate. I had a conversation last week, and I was explaining to a candidate about one of my recruitment clients, you know, why people have been successful in this vacancy before and where their careers have progressed as a result of that. And more importantly, why some people haven't been successful in that particular vacancy and the lessons we've learned from that. And I think a recruiter needs to be able to have that conversation with a candidate. And if they can't give that level of insight and have that level of understanding within a role, and that may be about team makeup, that this candidate is going to take over as a manager, then a candidate needs to start asking questions about, you know, does this recruiter really have any influence? Do they have any real control over the vacancy? Yeah. And I think if you're retained, you have that opportunity to gain that insight and to be consulted with your client and relay that back to the candidate. Does that make any sense, or am I waffling?
It does. And Joe, what are the tools that we recommend for recruiters to sort of aid that commitment process? You know, we spoke about the initial conversation, the icebreaker to say that I've been retained by a client, but how do we reinforce that? Or yeah, what would you recommend?
Darren, I think your points are incredibly valid. When we're working on a transactional contingent basis, we don't have the opportunity, the luxury, I don't think, to dig into all of those jobs that we're working and to dig into the client and to get that information. If you look at some of the biggest, complaints that candidates have about recruiters, it's that we ghost them and then we wonder why they do it back to us in return. We don't come back to them with feedback. We put them forward for jobs that aren't right for them, etc., etc. I think all of these are symptoms of a problem that we have in an industry where we are working, inch wide, inch deep, mile wide, not the other way around, working multiple vacancies, but we don't actually understand the vacancies. We're taking orders from clients. We're not pushing back. We're not consulting or advising. And then we have nothing to give to the candidates other than a 2-page, like a half paragraph of an advert, which is essentially just the job spec regurgitated out into an advert. No top performer is going to be attracted by 3 paragraphs about you must have this, our client's looking for this, our client's looking for that. So we don't take the candidate's perspective into play here at all. So actually, we don't have the information that we need to be able to sell these opportunities effectively to the right people. But then once you can get, which is another session, I'm pretty convinced that's another show. But actually, when you bring it back to then, what are we using to attract these candidates in the first place? Like you said, we're writing bog standard boring adverts, splashing them onto multiple locations. You're only ever really going to get the top 10 to 20% of people that are active. Those top performers who are semi-active, semi-passive are looking for something better than that. And then what we do is we have a quick conversation with them. Got this great job. Let me tell you about it. It's got nothing to do with the candidate and everything to do with what we want out of this. And then we attempt to engage them even further, engage their commitment to us by sending them a 2-page document, a 2-page job spec about what they will do in the job. Now, we already probably know they could do the job because we've matched them from a CV perspective, but I don't know many top performers who are going to truly engage in a process based on a 2-page job description. So, I mean, one of the things that we've worked on for years now at iIntro is taking that job spec and raising it. So, James, you call it a job spec on steroids, not sending job specs to candidates, sending job brochures, actually sending brochures that really sell the opportunity and the culture and the company in its best possible light. Now, obviously, you can't do that if you don't have that information. And it's not just that that's going to engage the candidates. You're right, Darren. You need to be able to match the right candidates with the right opportunity for them, not just the opportunity that's sat on your desk right now. But we need to get better at selling. A lot of our job has become admin focused, whereas it's not. It's sales focused. Would you agree, Darren? I think sending information about a job to a candidate, that's a sales task, not an admin task.
No, absolutely. And ultimately, what do candidates really want to know? What they really want to know is, do I genuinely have the skills, experience, and the knowledge to do this job? Do I have the right leadership communication style, attitudes and behaviors to be successful in this job? And how is this company going to measure that this potential career move for me is going to be the right career move for me? Because candidates' career progression and career stability is critically important. I think a lot of recruiters overlook this. I think one of the things that the intro process does, and it's not the only way to do this, but the intro process does, is by the time we've finished our discussion with the candidate, they don't just know that they can actually do the job in terms of skills and experience. They actually know that they're going to be successful in this role. They're going to be able to manage and lead this team in the way that they need to be managed and led. And more importantly, because of the solution that we use, we're actually going to give our client organization a roadmap about how to get the very best out of this candidate for the next 2 years, essentially. But on the reverse of that, we can actually give the candidate a team benchmarking process that will tell the candidate, if it's a management role, how to really maximize and get the very best out of this team and what management style is going to suit them to get that result. So we're taking it to a whole different level. Before candidates even engage in the vacancy, generally as a rule, they absolutely desperately want it because they know so much about it. And one of the things I was discussing the other day with somebody was, the use of key competency questions and assessments. This is not to challenge the candidate. It's to give the candidate a really deep insight into what the challenges and opportunities are going to be within this particular vacancy before they've even got into an interview. Yeah. So, for example, if you've got an adversarial team situation because, I don't know, merger and acquisition or something, yeah, as long as the candidate knows that before they go into the interview, they can say to themselves, do I want to be in a role where it's going to be quite adversarial for the first 6 months and have to deal with really difficult situations and emotions? Because if they don't, we need to know before they go into the process. We need to know as well. So I think that's the value of what we do and our extensive process of candidate assessment evaluation.
Mm-hmm. And just want to wrap up this particular section before we move on to the next section. But one of the things I want to talk about, and you've just sort of said some of the words, so almost took the words out of my mouth, Darren. One of the expressions that we use with clients, we'll come into that in a moment, is that we utilize multiple layers of scientific and objective assessment to help them identify the right talent to join their organization, to help them make more informed hiring decisions. Well, the flip side of that is we actually provide that, we share that information. This is what Joe was talking about with the candidate pack. We share what the process is for that candidate so they can understand that they haven't just been evaluated on knowledge, skills, and experience. You've got a great CV. You'll love this company, because it's a good paycheck for me. Actually, here's the process we're going to take you through. And then the clincher, I think, to aid this commitment point, is that one of the statistics that we use with our clients, which we also use with candidates, is that 96% of people that you go through this process are still in the job 1 year later. And that's not 100%. Sometimes there's always factors outside of our control. But a 96% success rate of people still being in the job 1 year later. Why are people in the job 1 year later? Because it's a good career match for them. So that's what we're sort of trying to trust them, that actually we're looking after your interests as well. Yeah, and Darren, your point you made earlier, and I noticed that Stephen Harrison Murfield has actually joined us, so thank you for joining us as well. That point about less is more if it's the right quality, and it's about focusing on quality rather than quantity, and that's a big challenge for us out there in the market at the moment, because I was talking to Paul Hickey from Grass Greener Group just yesterday, and he was talking about how one of his clients has demanded that he has 5 candidates in his shortlist. And he said, well, at this moment in time, I've got you 3. And you've actually taken 2 of them back to second interview. So why do you need more when you're just prolonging this process, which is also bad for the candidates? And we can talk about how to structure the process with clients and candidates moving on. But I think there's some really good stats in there that we can help people with. And what I'd urge people to do is, if you want to know more about how this process that we're talking about, how it's good for candidates, please do get in touch with us. Click on the link, follow, there's plenty of places to find. And one of us, probably Darren, will end up having a conversation with you. But let's just move the conversation on to how we can help influence client decisions and win more clients. And again, I think we may end up recycling the facts, but actually just giving them a different slant. So who wants to kick off with that?
Go on then, I will. So, we're all pretty long in the tooth when it comes to recruitment. Over the years, how many times have we started a recruitment process and we've very quickly established, once we're into it, that the client doesn't even really know what they need in the first place anyway. So then we kind of have to backtrack and kind of reinvent the job almost. And again, I think this comes back to my first point about, you need to be very robust when you're qualifying vacancies. And I'm not sure a lot of recruiters today are. I'm going to go back to some really simple basics here. There are questioning techniques. And I think, I'm not sure that people use them anymore. The how, what, why, where, when kind of scenarios. If I found you a perfect candidate tomorrow, how soon could you hire? If I found you 3 perfect candidates tomorrow, how quickly could you interview? And what would stop you hiring next week if I presented a perfect candidate to you today? And we're testing the job and qualifying the job. Very often we're victims of Chinese whispers in organizations because information is drilled down or is dripped down, and we end up with something like a HR administrator who distributes the job to a recruiter, and the recruiter is desperate to say, what are the challenges inherent within this role? Where's the current incumbent? How many times have you had to fill this vacancy in the past 2-3 years? And more often than not, the HR administrator doesn't have a clue about that stuff because they're not recruiters. And we need, as recruiters, to find that information out. It's critical to us as recruiters to really hone into what we need and to service our clients and give them what they really deserve, which in reality is accuracy, efficiency, and let's get the job done as quickly as possible and hire the right person first time every time. So recruiters need to be more resilient and more robust. And I think if you work on a retained basis, you're enabled, you're almost empowered to do that and to do that properly, which benefits everybody ultimately.
I think even in a world where we're working on contingent vacancies, I don't like the phrase taking the job brief or taking the job order, because that automatically suggests that we're just going to take it and go off with it, not ask any questions about it, that we just acquiesce to the client's demands. And you're absolutely right, Darren. I don't think we should ever assume that clients know what they need or what they're looking for in their business. And it's our job to help to educate and advise them, not just on the market, what's available, what's right for their business, and not what's just right now, but what's going to be right in 3 or 5 years' time, but also on the process. How many times do we question a client's need to have 5 or 10 CVs? How often do we question a client's need to have 5 stages of interview? When do we ever question a client's typical time to hire? Because these are all things that actually, as recruiters, is our job to put someone in a client's job, is our job to send a client CVs, or is our job to help that client to enable the growth of their business through, like you said, a more effective and a more efficient recruitment process? I personally think it's the third. And when you start talking like that, that's when you start to influence clients. But you can't influence clients without asking those what could be perceived as slightly awkward questions, because you're trying to disrupt normality. You're trying to tell them that their way of doing something isn't optimal. And you have to expect a bit of pushback from that, don't you, James? We've had situations where clients they can't accept that the way that they're doing it isn't the way that they should be doing it.
No, and I think you have to challenge them. And I think in terms of the world now, where how to win more business with clients is, I've been reading a book, Darren. I've got a book for you next week. I'm going to bring it to you. So and it's Joe's got it. It's called The Challenger Sale, and it talks about because we all think about we've got to build a relationship with clients, and that book dispels the myth, and it's the piles of research behind this statistic. And what you've got to do is you've got to challenge the decision-making process of the client. Now, the example you gave, Darren, if you're talking to the HR administrator, no offense to any HR administrators who are not listening to this anyway, but you're at the wrong level. And if you're going to sell a retained search assignment, you're not going to sell it through the people who are the gatekeepers, and that's no. You've got to be talking to the right people. But when you are, our view here as the salesperson is we have to challenge the client decision, and that's what they want. And actually, the clients, they want to learn something. They want to learn, why is my current process not working, and what can you do that's going to help me improve on that one? And so, just a simple one. It's one little takeaway for people to say to people: you can challenge their current retention rates because they don't know it. So you just ask it. Here's a simple question to ask them, and that's to say, of the last 10 people you've hired, how many are still with you at the end of their first year? So the last 10 people, how many are still with you? And the responses we get are 7, typical thing, but it's 6, 7, or 8. That's what people are going to say. Now, people, one rule I learned in sales: all clients tell lies. Apologies, Stephen, not you, if you reply. We under-reg it. So we undercook it, or we overcook it, sorry. So they might say 8 or 9, but very rarely they're going to say 10. Now, I just gave a statistic earlier that 96% of the people that in our process, that can help influence the clients, because they're going to say, well, how do you do that? Well, let me share with you how we do that. So we've got to challenge the clients, Darren. I think that's what we need to do.
Is this what differentiates a recruitment consultant from the term we use, a management consultant that specializes in providing talent acquisition solutions?
Absolutely.
We live in a world today where subservience is king. So we have recruiters that are so desperate to get candidates into the mix that they're subservient to the candidates, and they're not robustly challenging and qualifying the candidates.
Yeah.
And then we have recruiters that are subservient often to their clients, so they're afraid to challenge and to suggest new ways of doing things to their clients. The bizarre thing here is, and we use this analogy all the time, you might have a mid-sized company with a finance function, but their accounts and their audits are still done by KPMG, because KPMG is a professional firm when it comes to doing audits and their financial accounts and forecasting and annual reports. When a business comes to a recruiter, they should be coming to that recruiter in the knowledge that this is the professional at recruiting and talent acquisition. And if they think they've got internal resource that is more knowledgeable, better skilled, more adept at doing that, as a recruiter, you have to challenge that and say, then evidence this to me, because I think I can show you a better way of doing it that will result in better outcomes. And we touched on this a lot. Ultimately, recruitment, it's not about placing somebody into a vacancy. The overall concept here is that we're going to add to team cohesion and productivity. We're going to increase efficiency. And the more accurate and the better our recruitment process is, ultimately, the more profitable that business will become.
Absolutely.
And that's a really holistic view, but ultimately, surely that is what we're here to do, yeah?
Darren, I couldn't agree more.
100%.
That's the view we're in, isn't it, Joe? That's the process we want to sort of help people with.
Yeah, I think to talk about the third point now, the impact that doing these things can have on your recruitment business. What you've just said there is massive. I mean, dramatically, it's going to overnight change. Well, not overnight, but maybe over a period of time, change the mindset of the consultants that you've got working in your organization. How do they see themselves? What do they feel is their purpose? What do they believe they come in every day to do? Because, and ask your guys that question. It's a really interesting insight into how your organization perceives itself in the market. It's like you said, KPMG or any specialist. When you go to a specialist, you don't go to a specialist and tell them how to do their job for you. You go to them and you lay yourself in front of them and you say, I know you're the specialist and I want you to do what you do best, which is consult and advise and enable my business through the way that you do it. And what we don't do, to use the tax analogy, is we don't go to 4 accountants and say, right, all of you do my year-end taxes, and the first one to bring it back, I'll pay them. It sounds ludicrous, yet we allow that to happen in recruitment. And I know there's people sort of sat there with a very convenient narrative go around in their head. Well, we don't want to work retained because we won't be able to find the candidates, or it's not. It is like that. It's just that sometimes as recruiters, we don't want to change. We don't want to change our mindset or change our behaviors. But these things, Darren, might sound cliched or sometimes like it's just a word or it's a change of job title, but they make a big impact in a business, don't they? Yeah.
Do you know what the holy grail of recruitment for me is? And I've done this, and people can find these testimonials on my LinkedIn page. It's when you start to build out an organization, for example, into new regions, new territories, into growth. And you're so good at recruiting for them that the only roles that they ever come back to you with are new hires because of the success of the recruitment done in the first place. Now, there's a little bit of a quandary here, because if that's the case, you very quickly find yourself in a position where you're never actually backfilling jobs or replacing people that are leaving, because there's no jobs to backfill and nobody's actually leaving. So the number of vacancies quickly diminish.
Yeah.
And the only roles you actually get are new positions as a result of diversification, growth and success. But isn't that where you really want to be as a recruiter? You want 5 or 6, maybe 10 maximum organizations where your process and your methodology is so successful, the only time they come to you is because of that success, because they're growing and developing into new markets, etc., or it's career progression internally within the organization. And that's kind of where I think recruiters really should be, instead of sat there thinking, I hope 4 or 5 people leave the finance team this year so I can backfill those jobs. I know that historically this firm has really poor retention for their sales team. So happy days. And I'm going to fill 6 or 7 vacancies this year because they can't keep their sales staff.
Indeed.
Enable them and empower them and coach them on how to hire the right people to secure the sales staff and retain them over the long term. More successful business, more rapid growth, more exciting vacancies on a retained basis.
Excellent.
Yeah, amen to that.
Darren, you've had some impassioned thoughts on there today. Really do appreciate that. Next week, we're going to share with people, if you've gone out there and won a piece of retained work, and we know how difficult it can be, but how we can successfully help you manage those retained assignments from start to finish. So to how to manage client expectations, how to manage candidate expectations, and sort of bring those people through. So Darren, thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed your time with us.
I have indeed. Pleasure. Thank you.
Well, listen, everybody. So as we like to say at the end of this show, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me. Have a great week, everyone.
We'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Ciao from Bulgaria.
Bye.